Get on board the Bernier bus train. Come get on board the Bernier bus train. Once you hear that clickety-clack, there ain't no time for turning back. Oh, get on board the Bernier bus train. Good morning, USA, and welcome to another episode of the Bernier Bus Show. We have Kate Johnstone to thank this morning for this wonderful article, The Imperial Propaganda Machine, Notes from the Edge of the Narrative Matrix. She's got all these logos on here. I think they should paste these on a jacket that Elizabeth Warren has to wear every time she is involved in a debate or a news conference or a town hall meeting. CNN, Clinton News Network, MSDNC, The Daily Beast, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Huffington Post, Fox News, and The Atlantic. The corporate news. It's important to avoid fake news, Russian media, or conspiracy theorists. We must only trust those reputable news outlets who tell us that neoliberalism is working fine, that U.S. foreign policy is perfectly sane, and that protests are only happening in Hong Kong and nowhere else. The difference between state media and Western media is that in state media, the government controls what information the public is given about what's going on in the world in order to prevent political dissent. Whereas in Western media, this is instead done by billionaires. Any attempt to understand the world which fails to take into account the fact that extremely powerful people are pouring massive amounts of money and resources into manipulating your understanding of the world will necessarily result in a distorted worldview. Whenever news media reports unsubstantiated assertions from anonymous sources and government agencies, just mentally insert, "Here is something the government told us to tell you," into the beginning of the report, because that's all they're doing. Russia and China haven't become any more of a threat to you than they were 3 years ago, yet you think about them many times more often than you did back then. That's propaganda at work, FYI. All the establishment loyalists you argue with are ever really saying is, "No, the TV would never lie to me." Sometimes all I can do is stare in awe at the power and efficiency of the imperial propaganda machine. When I first started this gig in 2016, Assange had way more support from Burners, Greens, Trumpers, all across the spectrum. Now a large amount of that support has been eroded. For Trumpers, Assange is being extradited for his own good to bring down the deep state. For liberals, he's a Russian asset. For leftists, he's a rapist and fascist enabler. There's a narrative for everyone, no matter where you are on the political spectrum. It's really impressive. I love alternative media, but we're fucking idiots sometimes. You never see MSM doing our job for us, but we do their job for them all the time by attacking other alternative media figures, circulating CIA, CNN narratives. It's the same thing. I like how she slashed them together there. About targeted nations and targeted individuals, etc. The only reason to ever do mainstream media's work for them is if you're looking for a job in MSM, mainstream media. If you actually want to participate in alternative media, it's your job to make things harder for establishment narrative managers, not easier. They get paid enough already to do their own work. Dominant power structures are corrupt beyond the possibility of salvation, and humanity is driving itself toward myriad cataclysmic disasters all at once. Yet many are more worried about those who share their basic ideology but have slightly different opinions. This is stupid. There's no separation between the personal struggle to free yourself from untruth and the collective struggle to free the world from untruth. In the same way, there's no separation between an antibody attacking an individual pathogen and the entire body recovering from a sickness. Now that's pretty good. We really do need to recover from a sickness. MSM's mainstream media's official position appears to be there is no ideological difference whatsoever between Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, other than the fact that you have permission to elect Warren, but not Sanders. Apart from that, though, they're exactly the same. She's talking about Democrats and Republicans. The most highlighted quote here is, there's a difference between Democrats and Republicans in the sense that there's a difference between the jab and the cross in boxing. The jab is often used to set up the more damaging cross, but they're both wielded by the same boxer, and they're both punching you in the face. That's good to remember. This goes on. It's really good, and I urge you to read all of it. I'll link to it in the comments below. An example of this, here's an article. 2/3 of Bernie Sanders supporters also would support Elizabeth Warren. What they should have said is 1/3 of Bernie Sanders supporters will not vote blue no matter who. But this is MSM, mainstream media's attempt, using data to lie to you, to make it seem like Elizabeth Warren is an acceptable choice. What they're leaving out is, in swing states, if you've got 1/3 of the voters that won't switch over, that aren't loyal to the Democratic Party, who are not likely even to vote, let alone vote for a neoliberal candidate, if you have 1/3 of Bernie supporters, and you're doing the math in the swing states, you have to figure this out. We've talked about it before. And the other thing mainstream media won't cover is that very fact. Here they are trying to equate Bernie and Elizabeth and push against the idea of Bernie or bust. Here's an actual news article that talks about Bernie or bust to speak against it and to say that it's not a real thing. But we have more Bernie or Trumpers than last time. We have more Bernie or busters than last time. And we have more at stake than last time. I don't think anybody who is sane has figured out the people who pretend to be sane, the people who pretend to be the grown-ups in the room. I don't know why they hear it and then they don't hear it, but they're not hearing it the way the propaganda machine would make them hear it if the propaganda machine wanted them to hear it. And that's the part that makes me lose faith in humanity. Here's someone else who may have or may not have lost faith in humanity. This is Kathy Copeland Patton. A handy-dandy guide to what establishment Dems say as opposed to what they mean. Purity tests are bad. We're not obliged to meet the standards we expect the GOP to uphold. Joe Biden isn't a creepy kid groper. Photographic evidence is no match for my cognitive dissonance. The DNC didn't cheat Bernie in 2016. We get all our news from Rachel Maddow and WAPO. Obama was the best president in living memory. We swooned when he sang Al Green, but looked the other way when he bombed the living shit out of innocent civilians. Vote blue no matter who. We have an undeserved sense of entitlement to the votes of anyone who's not a staunch Republican. That's a really powerful narrative that Kate Johnstone would agree with. We don't need your votes, but we'll blame your lack of support for our inevitable loss. According to Max Blumenthal, the writing's on the wall. The Democrats have lost already because they intend not to nominate Bernie Sanders. The machinery is tough to resist. The machinery that Kate Johnstone says, she seems positive. She ends the article on a positive note, like, we got this, we got this. But this machine is big. It's tough to beat it. But we'll keep trying. But they will blame Bernie or busters for their loss, when really they should just blame themselves because they don't know how to appeal to the working class. And they don't know how to mobilize the working class to get anything done, even when they have control of the House or the Senate. Russia gave Trump the election. I'd rather shoot the messenger than risk being Arkancided. Bernie isn't a real Democrat. We will vote blue no matter who, unless it's Bernie Sanders. That's what you've been hearing lately. I showed you a Facebook group where it's important to be civil to everyone. No bashing of candidates. But an exception will be made for Bernie Sanders. So that's where you're coming at as the mainstream Democrats. Hillary was the most qualified candidate in 2016. We consider narcissism and sociopathy to be the most important traits for a U.S. president. Not to mention imperialism. Biden is leading in the polls. Biden is polling at 150% with the coveted telegraph demographic. For you youngsters, a telegraph is an old school way, even older than telephones, if you can believe that. We have to unite against Trump. Not being Trump is the only selling point we have. Boy, that's the truth. Medicare for all will never happen. There is no way we're pissing off our insurance industry donors just to save the lives of the hoi polloi. That elitism that Kathy's talking about there, the hoi polloi, we don't have any desire to do anything for real people. We just want to protect the status quo. We're not going to piss off our insurance industry donors. Any Democrat is better than any Republican. Vote for whatever shitty corporate neoliberal we choose for you. How much is Putin paying you? Boy, I've gotten that one a lot. We have no cogent response to your argument and must resort to red baiting. Hillary needs to hear that one. If you don't vote blue, we'll get another 4 years of Trump, and it will be all your fault. We tried and failed with the guilt-tripping technique in 2016, but we lack any other strategy. I got cyber bitch slapped by a burner, and now I'd never vote for him. I was never going to vote for him in the first place. I get that one a lot. Why are you so mean? Why do you insist so vehemently that Bernie is the only one who can beat Trump? Because it's the truth. Well, because you're so insistent, I'm not going to vote for him now. That's just kind of how it goes. Let's just get a Dem in the White House and worry about policy later. Now you know where they're coming from. We have absolutely no intention of disturbing the status quo. If you refuse to vote blue no matter who, you're privileged. The irony of typing this from the apartment we gentrified you out of completely escapes us. Caucuses should be abolished. It's way harder to rig a caucus, so they must be eliminated. There is no difference between Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. We hope that if we repeat this enough times, people will start to believe it. Trump is evil incarnate, but our neoliberal candidates, such as Elizabeth Warren, all gave him a standing ovation anyway. Hillary Rodham Clinton isn't running. Stop denigrating her. We know that whether she throws her hat in or not, she holds our party's purse strings, and progressive insubordination will not be tolerated. Rural areas are lousy with uneducated Trumpsters. The closest we've been to a small town is a flyover between New York City and Los Angeles. We love the Kennedys because after more than half a century, they are still carrying a party they wouldn't even recognize today. The DNC is an independent entity and has no obligation to nominate the people's choice of candidate. Democratic primaries are political theater to convince the masses they actually have a say in their future. Like the balloons falling. Oh my goodness, that image will ever remain in my mind. I will only vote for a woman. I get all my news from The View. Boy, I've covered The View on this show, but only by cringing. Warren will ensure every American has access to health care. We're fully aware that access does not mean affordability. We just don't care. Anyway, that was a pretty good list. Here is Lauren Martinchek, one of their media oligarchy points. Lauren says, there's no denying that the healthcare system in the United States has been at the forefront of national discourse in the midst of the Democratic presidential primaries. Of course, largely due to the fact that Bernie Sanders has made it his mission to draw attention to and change the fundamental brokenness of the current system. Now, it should come as no surprise that calls for an overhaul of the way health insurance is provided, such as Bernie's Medicare for All plan, have been met with staunch resistance not just from the left, but from the more moderate corporate-friendly wing of the Democratic Party as well. There have been a wide array of talking points in favor of the status quo hurled at bold proposals like Medicare for All, naturally with a few particularly common ones standing out from the bunch. One of the most disgusting is the notion that those in favor of Medicare for All want to take away insurance coverage from the American people. The other, even more popular, would be the idea that people actually like their health insurance companies. And she goes on to debunk that idea. We had Sarah Nelson, we showed a clip of Sarah Nelson from The Hill. She was interviewed on The Hill Rising. Sagar and Crystal Ball were interviewing her, and Sarah represents one of the largest unions, the flight attendants union, and made it very clear that unions in no way are being hoodwinked by this argument. She said that they would want this off the table in all their bargaining. They don't want to keep bargaining their medical insurance. They would rather have that off the table, have that as a given, and then they could argue for bigger salaries and benefits. Frankly, the notion that people like their private healthcare insurance has taken hold in the mainstream media circles, and that the fact that it has would be funny if it wasn't such a ridiculous and harmful narrative to spread. That lie is spread to make people forget that their private insurance is what can prevent them from getting the care that they need and is the reason for unnecessary financial hardships and even deaths all through the country. The point of a private health insurance company is to deny care, is to make it more difficult to get the care you need. I don't think we should forget that. And lastly, I don't know if I told you about this. 2/3 of Bernie Sanders would support, well, 1/3 at least wouldn't support Elizabeth Warren, and that's enough to swing it to Trump, which is not what anyone wants who's sane. So this last one. Teacher strikes have changed the political landscape across the United States. And that's another thing that mainstream media do not want you to hear about. These especially wildcat strikes in red states. Democratic gubernatorial candidate Andy Beshear's apparent victory in Kentucky might not seem to have much in common with the wins Chicago teachers secured after their October strike. But both events bear the imprint of massive teacher uprisings over the past several years and show how they are affecting the political landscape in deep and surprising ways. The strikes have stretched through deep red states like West Virginia, Oklahoma, Arizona, and Kentucky, but also cities in blue California and purple Colorado. My research documents how the teacher movement is inspiring new action in and out of the workplace with real economic and political impacts. Hey, Elizabeth wants to hear from you. Oh, go tell her some stuff. Yeah, tell her that she needs to be more proactive with regard to mobilizing the labor force and not just have a plan for it. In Kentucky, there's clear evidence that the public is firmly behind school teachers. That's what a lot of the rhetoric around striking over the past has been in my union, in my failed union, APSCUF. In my failed union, they've said over the years, well, our PR will take a hit if we go on strike. But in Kentucky, there's clear evidence that the opposite is true. In a survey of Kentuckians fielded at the start of 2019, I found that over 2/3 of respondents said that they supported the teacher protests. An overwhelming majority of Kentuckians even said they would support future teacher strikes and walkouts to boost school spending and resources. The Kentucky strikes also helped teachers to build their organizing strength. This left them well positioned, and this is the dangerous part that they don't want you to hear about. This left them well positioned to mobilize for the gubernatorial election. And not only that election, but other elections, local and national. Bluegrass state teachers volunteered in scores for the Bashar campaign and organized Get Out the Vote efforts on the same Facebook page that had become a hub for action in the walkouts. So these Facebook pages that are being used like an Occupy Wall Street or any other riot also help get out the vote. These social media. That's why I remember seeing, I can't remember if it was Kentucky or West Virginia, where a Facebook page that had been used to mobilize protests was suspended. And so Facebook, they should probably worry now that Facebook is going to take this page down now that they see how powerful it is. So in Kentucky, that's what's going on. But it's not just happening in teachers in Kentucky, with teachers in Kentucky. Teacher actions across the country are broadening out from organizing around education policy to organizing for political races. With a team of researchers from Columbia University, I have been studying the 6 original Red for Ed states with teacher walkouts or strikes: Arizona, Colorado, Kentucky, North Carolina, Oklahoma, and West Virginia. I collected state and local newspaper coverage of teachers in those states from 2017 to present day, comparing differences in how teachers were described before and after the strikes. That's a good thing to find out. I also looked at newspapers in similar states where teachers did not go on strike. I found a regular pattern. Teachers in striking states were moving from the streets to the ballot box, focusing on races at all levels of government, from state legislatures to Congress. Now look at this advertisement. Health insurance, UPMC. Why would they put an advertisement on this article? Just curious. And this wave of teacher strikes is not just inspiring more political action, it is also energizing further labor interest and action outside of schools. In a new study, my co-authors and I surveyed a representative sample of parents in early 2019 across the 6 teacher walkout states. We were interested in knowing whether parents who were the most exposed to the strikes, the ones who actually had kids affected by the strikes, were feeling about the teacher strikes and the labor movement. You might think that facing massive disruption to their children's education would make them turn against the teachers, but we found the opposite. The teachers, or the parents who had kids in school who were affected by the strikes were more supportive of the teachers than those who didn't have kids of school age. Digging deeper, we found that the strikes were the most motivating for parents who previously had little positive experience with the labor movement. Conservatives, Republicans, and individuals without friends or family in unions. In an era where only 1 out of 10 workers belongs to a union, it's easy to rely on stereotypes about the labor movement from the mainstream media or politicians. But when workers, even conservative workers, see what successful labor action can do, the prospects of labor organizing seem much more appealing. My research suggests that unions should not shy away from opportunities to educate the public on what the labor movement can offer through collective action. This is a big deal. And this article it's The Guardian. It's not exactly mainstream, but it should go viral. It would be wonderful if people could see the truth about teacher strikes, trucker strikes. I would be interested in showing the effects of trucker strikes in Brazil and other places in the southern hemisphere. We've got a lot of strikes happening with truckers. If teachers and truckers got together, the world would stop, and that would be an opportunity then for things to get better. All right, so let's keep fighting the mainstream media, and I'll hope to see you tomorrow. Keep on burning.
Get on board the Bernier bus train. Come get on board the Bernier bus train. Once you hear that clickety-clack, there ain't no time for turning back. Oh, get on board